Vladimir Volfovich Zhirinovsky, on 25 April 1946, is a Russian politician and was twice, in 2000 and in 2004, elected Deputy Speaker of the Duma. Zhirinovsky is often viewed as a showman of Russian politics, blending populist and nationalist rhetoric, anti-Western invective and a brash, confrontational style. His views have been described as fascist, according to Reuters. Although nominally part of the Russian opposition, he is widely seen as a servant of Kremlin policy, used to float radical opinions to test public reaction. Early life and politics. Zhirinovsky was born in Almaty, the capital of the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic, modern-day Kazakhstan. His father, Volfovich Zhirinovsky, was a Polish Jew, and his mother, Alexandra Pavlovna, was of Russian background. His paternal grandfather was a wealthy industrialist from Kostopol, who owned the largest timber factory in Ukraine and was head of the Jewish community. 4 of Zhirinovsky's relatives had been killed during the Holocaust. Zhirinovsky's parents split while he was still an infant, abandoning the family. Zhirinovsky's father, Wolfovich Zhirinovsky, immigrated to Israel in 1949, where he worked as an agronomist in Tel Aviv, until he died in a bus accident in 1983. Zhirinovsky did not find out about his father's life in Israel until many years later. Zhirinovsky himself is an Eastern Orthodox Christian. In July 1964, Zhirinovsky moved from Almaty to Moscow, where he began his studies in the Department of Turkish Studies, Institute of Asian and African Studies at Moscow State University, from which he graduated in 1969. Zhirinovsky then went into military service in Tbilisi during the early 1970s. He would later get a law degree and work at various posts in state committees and unions. He was awarded a Dr. Sci. in philosophy by MSU in 1998. Although he participated in some reformist groups, Zhirinovsky was largely inconsequential in Soviet political developments during the 1980s. While he contemplated a role in politics, a nomination attempt for a seat as a People's Deputy in 1989 was quickly abandoned. Founding of the Liberal Democratic Party. In 1990, Zhirinovsky, along with Vladimir Bogachev, took initiatives which led to the founding of the Liberal Democratic Party, the second registered party in the Soviet Union and therefore the first officially sanctioned opposition party, according to the former CPSU Politburo member Alexander Nikolaevich Yakovlev. This party started as a joint project of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union leadership and the KGB. Yakovlev wrote in his memoirs that KGB Director Vladimir Khrushchev presented the project of the puppet LDPR party at a meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev and informed him about the selection of the LDPR leader. According to Yakovlev, the name of the party was chosen by KGB General Philip Bobkov. However, Bobkov said that he was against the creation of Zubatov's pseudo-party under KGB control that would direct the interests and sentiments of certain social groups. Zhirinovsky's first political breakthrough came in June 1991 when he came third in Russia's first presidential election, gathering more than 6 million votes, a 7.81%. Afterwards, the LDPR garnered a reputation as an ineffective vehicle for opposition against the government, and one that lacked either credibility or authenticity, particularly given Zhirinovsky's vocal support for the Soviet coup attempt of 1991. This view was further encouraged by rumors, denied by Zhirinovsky, that he was an agent of the KGB and that the LDPR was a farcical creation meant to either discredit or distract earnest opposition to the government. Such impressions would last even as the Soviet Union was dissolved and the Russian Communist Party itself took an opposition role. In 1992, Zhirinovsky made contact with Jean-Marie Le Pen, leader at the time of France's Front National. Edouard Limonov of the National Bolshevik Party introduced the men to each other, and the FN later provided logistical support, including computers and fax machines. Zhirinovsky suggested establishing the International Center of Right-Wing Parties in Moscow and invited Le Pen to Moscow. The Liberal Democratic Party remained an important force in Russian politics. At the height of its fortunes, the LDPR gathered 23% of the vote in the 1993 Duma elections and achieved a broad representation throughout the country, the LDPR being the top vote-getter in 64 out of 87 regions. This fact encouraged Zhirinovsky to once again vie for the presidential office, this time against incumbent Boris Yeltsin. The fact that Yeltsin's candidacy seemed seriously challenged by Russian nationalist groups and a rejuvenated Communist Party alarmed many outside observers, particularly in the Western world, who expressed concern that such developments posed a serious threat to the survival of Russian democracy, already in a very fragile state. Zhirinovsky became a focal point of harsh criticism and seemed the living embodiment of authoritarianism and militarism in modern Russia, while some observers inclined to consider his controversial statements as stark efforts to drum up nationalist support, not viewable as anything more serious than electoral fodder meant for domestic consumption. There was great consternation at the fact that in February 1996, months before a presidential election, Zhirinovsky placed second in opinion polls, behind communist Gennady Zyuganov and ahead of Boris Yeltsin. In the end, however, Zhirinovsky placed fifth with a 5.7% share in the first round of voting. Since then, the party's fortunes have stabilized somewhat, with the 2003 election seeing a LDPR vote share of 11.7%. In 2004, Zhirinovsky declined to even be nominated by the party, leaving the role to Oleg Malishkin, who received 2% support from voters. For his own part, Zhirinovsky has done a great deal to foster a reputation as a loud and boisterous populist who speaks on behalf of the Russian nation and people, even when the things he says are precisely what many people at home or abroad do not want to hear. Zhirinovsky infamously promised voters in 1991 that if he were elected, free vodka would be distributed to all. Similarly, he once remarked, during a political rally inside a Moscow department store, that if he were made president, underwear would be freely available. Zhirinovsky has on several occasions become involved in altercations with other politicians and debate opponents. As a candidate, he also took part in the 2000 and 2008 presidential elections, promising a police state and to institute summary executions. A BBC documentary from 1995 showed Zhirinovsky telling the crowd at a campaign rally, "Help us, and you'll never have to vote again. I'm not saying vote for us and maybe in 20 years' time somebody will do something. No, these will be the last elections. The last ones." While some commentators call Zhirinovsky a fascist or a neo-fascist, some others dismiss him as a mere clown, and as the Kremlin's willing political tool to neutralize the right-wing voter potential and, for a time being, also as a radical bogeyman for the West. Views. Zhirinovsky has expressed admiration for the 1996 United States presidential election contender Pat Buchanan. Buchanan, referring positively to a comment in which Buchanan labeled the United States Congress as Israeli-occupied territory and said that both countries were under occupation and that, to survive, we could set aside places on U.S. and Russian territories to deport this small but troublesome tribe. Buchanan strongly rejected this endorsement, saying he would provide safe haven to persecuted minorities if Zhirinovsky were ever elected Russia's president, eliciting a harsh response by Zhirinovsky: "You soiled your pants as soon as you got my congratulations. Who are you afraid of? Zionists." Zhirinovsky repeatedly denied his father's Jewishness until he published Ivan Close Your Soul in July 2001, describing how his father, Volfovich Zhirinovsky, changed his surname from Zhirinovsky to Zhirinovsky. He rhetorically asked, "Why should I reject Russian blood, Russian culture, Russian land, and fall in love with the Jewish people only because of that single drop of blood that my father left in my mother's body?" Another frequently cited quote from Zhirinovsky is, "My mother was Russian and my father was a lawyer." Zhirinovsky later disowned the statement after researching his father's life in Israel. Discussing the statement, Zhirinovsky says, "Journalists mocked me for saying I was the son of a lawyer, and I am really the son of an agronomist." Discussing his father, Zhirinovsky says with tears in his eyes, "All my life I was looking for him. I believed that he was alive. I believed that someday he would find me. But there is a silver lining. I tried to imitate him. And I was able to achieve a certain position in life, even without the support of my father." Zhirinovsky has Israeli relatives, including his uncle and cousin, who he met and befriended for the first time only after discovering more about his family's story in Israel. Zhirinovsky has led official Russian delegations to Israel. Visiting Israel, he says that he is concerned particularly about the economic situation for the more than 1 million Russians living in Israel. He also states that Russia will never allow any kind of violence against Israel. Besides expressing his concern for Turks and Caucasians displacing the Russian population from the native territory, Zhirinovsky also advocated for all Chinese and Japanese to be deported from the Russian Far East. During his 1992 visit to the United States, Zhirinovsky called on television for the preservation of the white race and warned that the white Americans were in danger of turning their country over to black and Hispanic people. In 2004, Zhirinovsky spoke at the City Court of St. Petersburg in reference to the assassination of Galina Starovoitova, after accusing Starovoitova of having worked for foreign intelligence. He said, "I have always said openly that for Democrats of pro-Western orientation there are only three roads: prison, the grave, and emigration." In August 2016, Zhirinovsky prayed for the Republican presidential election nominee, Donald Trump, whose antics similar to himself but different in backgrounds, to win over Hillary Clinton, whom he deemed as the Americans' dangerous choice, in order to take his party's ideology global. He also expressed his desire to test his DNA whether Trump and Zhirinovsky were related. The Last Break Southward. The Last Break Southward is the magnum opus of Zhirinovsky in which he expressed his worldview. Since the 1980s, I have elaborated a geopolitical conception, the last break southward. Russia's reach to the shores of the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. Quote, "This is really the solution for the salvation of the Russian nation. It solves all problems and we gain tranquility. Russia will rule the space from Kabul to Istanbul. The United States would feel safer with the Russian rule in the region, since wars there would cease under the Russian rule. Perhaps some people in Kabul, Tehran, or Ankara would not like it, but many people would feel better. The Persians and Turks would suffer a bit, but all the rest would gain. The bells of the Orthodox Church must bell from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, and Jerusalem becomes close. It is necessarily that the Christian world reunifies in Jerusalem. The Palestinian problem can be solved by partial transfer of the Palestinian population to the former territories of Turkey and Iran. The great Russian language and Russian ruble would wield Near Eastern and Central Asian peoples into one Russian citizenship. Along the Russia southern sphere from India to Bosphorus, other spheres of influence will stretch from north to south in the forthcoming world order. Latin America will be in the American sphere, Africa in the European sphere, and Japan and China will rule Southeast Asia, Indonesia and Australia. Everywhere the direction is the same, north-south. Geopolitically, it is logical. Hence, the distribution along such a geopolitical formula would be very beneficent for the whole of humanity, and all over the planet would be established warm and clear political climate. On this occasion, we need a man with at least planetary thinking, who would realize the geopolitical formula, guaranteeing the interests of the majority on the planet. This is the fate of Russia. It is destination, fate. We must do it, for we have no choice. This is geopolitics. We would do it, assured Zhirinovsky, alluding to himself, by the efforts of an honest, perseverant, patriotically inspired president. Foreign relations and military excursions. Zhirinovsky is well known for his boasts pertaining to other countries, having expressed a desire to reunite countries of the ex-Soviet near abroad with Russia to within the Russia's borders of 1900. He has advocated forcibly retaking Alaska from the United States, turning Kazakhstan into Russia's backyard, and provoking wars between the clans and the nations of the former Soviet Union and occupying what will remain of it when the wars are over. Zhirinovsky, who encourages separatism within the Russian minority in the Baltic countries, endorsed the forcible reoccupation of these countries and said nuclear waste should be dumped there. In 1999, at the start of the Second Chechen War, Zhirinovsky, an ardent supporter of the First War in Chechnya in the mid-1990s, advocated hitting some Chechen villages with tactical nuclear weapons. He has also advocated using nuclear weapons and naval blockade-imposed starvation in the event of a Russian war against Japan. In 2008, during the resulting political row between the United Kingdom and Russia, he suggested dropping nuclear bombs over the Atlantic Ocean in an effort to flood Britain. Zhirinovsky hailed what he described as the democratic process in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, whom he supported strongly. The friendship dated from at least the Persian Gulf War in 1991, during which time Zhirinovsky sent several armed volunteers from the Falcons of Zhirinovsky group to support the Iraqi president. Allegations have dogged Zhirinovsky closely since the fall of Baghdad that he personally profited from illicit oil sales as part of the oil for food scandal, a charge investigated in 2005 by the Independent Inquiry Committee into the Oil for Food program and the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. He is also close to the Serbian nationalist leader and war crimes suspect Vojislav Šešelj. Zhirinovsky said he is dreaming of the day when Russian soldiers can wash the boots in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean and switch to year-round summer uniforms following Russia's conquest of Afghanistan, Iran and Turkey and occupation of the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. He also declared that Bulgaria should annex the Republic of Macedonia, and said that Romania is an artificial state supposedly created by Italian gypsies who seized territory from Russia, Bulgaria and Hungary. Russia's southern neighbor Georgia has been another frequent target of Zhirinovsky's rhetoric. After Aslan Abashidze was ousted from power in 2004 as leader of Ahara, an autonomous Georgian region, Zhirinovsky worried that similar revolutions would occur in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Highly critical of Georgia's pro-Western line, he is an energetic supporter of Georgia's breakaway Republic of Abkhazia. In a high-profile incident in August 2004, he departed on a campaign to promote a tourist season in Abkhazia aboard a cruise ship which was briefly intercepted by a Georgian Coast Guard vessel. After war broke out between Russia and Georgia in 2008, Zhirinovsky argued in favor of Russian recognition of Abkhazian and South Ossetian independence. "We should have taken the whole territory of Georgia under control," he complained, "and arrested all Georgian officers and taken them here, like to Guantanamo, arrested Saakashvili and handed him over for trial by a military tribunal and gone to the border with Turkey." Quote. In 2009, he called the decision to hold NATO military exercises in Georgia during Soviet Victory Day celebrations in Moscow a total revision of the history of the Great Patriotic War, and suggested that Russia should respond by conducting large-scale joint military drills with Cuba and Venezuela in the Caribbean Sea. Zhirinovsky has been expelled from Bulgaria for insulting its president and was barred from entry to Germany. In 2005, Kazakhstan declared Zhirinovsky persona non grata on the territory of his historical homeland, due to the politician's controversial speech about the change of the Russia-Kazakhstan border, in which he questioned the Kazakhs' place in history. In 2006, Zhirinovsky became persona non grata also in Ukraine, following his statements regarding the January 2006 Russia-Ukraine gas dispute. In reaction to Condoleezza Rice's criticism of Russian foreign policy during the dispute, Zhirinovsky stated that Condoleezza Rice needs a company of soldiers needs to be taken to barracks where she would be satisfied. At the film premiere of the film Taras Bulba in 2009, he stated, "Everyone who sees the film will understand that Russians and Ukrainians are one people and that the enemy is from the West." In February 2010, Zhirinovsky claimed that eastern Ukraine would become part of Russia in 5 years, claiming that the population is largely Russian, and called President-elect of Ukraine Viktor Yanukovych basically Russian. On the November 2006 death by poisoning of Russian defector Alexander Litvinenko in London, Zhirinovsky said, "Any traitor must be eliminated using any methods. If you have joined the special services to work, then you should work, but to betray, to run away abroad, to give up the secrets you learned while working, all of this looks bad." Sergei Beltsev, Zhirinovsky's former bodyguard and State Duma member from the LDPR, added, "The deserved punishment reached the traitor. I am sure his terrible death will be a warning to all the traitors that in Russia the treason is not to be forgiven. I would recommend to citizen Berezovsky to avoid any food at the commemoration for his crime accomplice Litvinenko." Quote. In the 2007 election, political patronage from Zhirinovsky enabled Litvinenko murder suspect Andrei Lugavoy to win election to the Russian parliament and thus the formal parliamentary immunity. He also accused Great Britain of fomenting the World War I, the October Revolution, World War II, and a dissolution of the Soviet Union. Writing about Marine Le Pen, he said that she could outdo her father because, instead of saying that Islam is terrorism, she simply insists that France is a secular nation that will not stand for hundreds of thousands of Muslims practicing the religious traditions. With this argument, Marine has cleverly defended the French people's right to a secular nation. Quote, in that vein, he said that she has the chance to represent the French majority. In 2013, when asked about former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, he said, Yulia Tymoshenko, I'm sorry, is a woman. I don't like them, as it's easier to persuade a woman. Women are more compliant, and it's dangerous.